Welcome. My name's David Wood, and my subject is human flourishing, more specifically, how human flourishing requires transhumanist flourishing. Before I justify that claim, a few quick words about myself. I am proud to say that I have been an advocate of transhumanism since at least 2006, which is the first time I gave a talk about transhumanism at a public event, a global gathering of transhumanists that year in Helsinki in Finland. I have organized numerous transhumanist events and projects over the years, but I am also in some ways a critic of part of what happens in the extended transhumanist community, a critic of what I call impoverished transhumanism, which forms a kind of shadow around transhumanism that makes it harder for some people to see the true claims and abilities of transhumanism and misleads some critics to be more critical of transhumanism than they should be. Long before I was a transhumanist, I enjoyed being a student of the philosophy of science, and in my professional career, I've been at times a mathematician, a software engineer, a technologist, and a futurist. Indeed, I was a futurist before I knew I was a futurist. I spent 25 years envisioning and helping to create the worlds of mobile handheld computing and subsequently smartphones. When I was co-founder of Symbian, and my teams wrote significant parts of the software that powered many of the world's first 500 million smartphones. In that time, I also served as the technology planning lead at Accenture Mobility. And I wrote about my experiences and what I learned over that time in my first book, which you can see here, Smartphones and Beyond. And the main thing I learned in that time was how difficult it is to properly manage exponential disruption, especially considering the human aspects of exponential disruption. And that is a lesson I take with me through the larger exponential disruptions, even larger than those of smartphones, that I frequently talk about and my guests talk about in meetings of London futurists, which nowadays also features a highly rated podcast, the London Futurist podcast. Over the years, I've written or co-authored 14 books about the future, including some on the abolition of aging or the death of death, one on the big vision of sustainable superabundance, some on the transformations that are possible within politics, some on the wise management of the risks that AI poses. But in today's talk, I'm mainly going to be picking up some of the themes I developed in this book here, a book which is some significant length, 642 pages, where you can find ample footnotes and references for the claims I'm about to make in this talk. That book, as you can see, Vital Foresight, The Case for Active Transhumanism. So let's get on with it. Let me review the case that human flourishing requires transhumanist flourishing. What I mean by this is we need to see the wise application of technological possibilities so that we transcend some age-old human limitations which may be the death of us in many ways in the years and decades to come, unless we indeed transcend these limitations. The technological possibilities I have in mind are more wide-ranging than those of smartphones, which I experienced in my own professional career. They are changes which at first seem to happen slowly, disappointingly, frustratingly slowly, before, whoosh, there's a much quicker transformation. and things accelerate. I'm anticipating that what we've seen so far in terms of breakthroughs with AI are but just a foretaste of larger changes coming soon. Changes which, by the additional intelligence provided, will allow us to make significant breakthroughs in other technologies such as nanotech, biotech, and cognotech. The changes in nanotech will allow us in turn to change three large industries: manufacturing, energy, and recycling. The changes in biotech will allow us again to make huge changes in three industries: agriculture, food preparation, and healthcare. And the changes in cognotech will allow us to transform education, entertainment, and also our spiritual aspects too, with higher levels of consciousness being more easily accessible. So indeed, these will lead to multiple changes in all aspects of society. To put some timescales on this, I'm talking about major changes in AI in the next 2 to 3 years, leading to changes in these other areas, taking a bit longer because they require physical changes as well, so 3 to 10 years, and the associated changes in society will increasingly be anticipated in just the next few years. So it's important for all futurists to anticipate these discussions so that they can go more wisely rather than go in a state of panic. So I congratulate the organizers of this conference for indeed allowing this anticipation. The outcome that I see as possible and desirable is a positive transhumanist scenario, which will allow us humans to move to higher levels of functioning, higher levels of flourishing, shown here as H+, sometimes described as a 5S civilization. The first S is for super longevity, when we transcend the ages-old aspect of our condition, which sees the decay of our bodies far too soon. This super longevity will allow us to live lives much longer and healthier. The second S is for super intelligence. It will allow us to transcend the tendencies that lead us individually and collectively to many stupid actions. It will allow us collectively and individually to think more clearly, more accurately. The third S is for super happiness, whereby we can transcend the tendencies we have inherited in evolution for depressive behavior, for egotistical behavior. It will allow us to be kinder, more joyous, more enlightened generally. The fourth S is for super democracy, transcending our tendencies to abuse power, to deceive one another, instead leading to a society that is more supportive, more tolerant and more diverse. And the fifth S is a broader vision of superabundance, a transformation in our human relations with nature and the wider cosmos for mutual sustainable benefit. That's an attractive future, in my view, but it's by no means the only future that transhumanism talks about. It also talks about the major risks that could arise from inadvertent consequences of more powerful technology, shown in a picture as follows: humanity descending to humanity minus, because our politicians and leaders might use technology to surveil us, to monitor us, to manipulate us, and to fight wars against us and against each other. It will allow the corporations, the large businesses, to pursue financial interests in a way that is even more destructive than is sometimes the case already, by ignoring proper attention to externalities. It will allow some devious, horrible people, and there are sadly some amongst us, to create terrible bioweapons or neurotoxins with effects much worse than the dreadful consequences of COVID recently. It will allow us, if we're not careful, to build cultures that at first seem glitzy and polished, but are actually fragile, lacking resilience, and are prone to all kinds of hacking. And possibly worst of all, it will generate, if we're not careful, a consolidation of power in the hands of a few victors, with many others being left behind, suffering all kinds of pain as a result, in some cases causing outrage as a result. For all these reasons, it is vital to harness the acceleration of technology, steering it towards desirable outcomes, applying brakes where needed, and yes, sometimes accelerating it. For example, accelerating the understanding of safe AI as opposed to simply capable AI. So that's part of the big context in which I offer all my remarks, a context which I enumerate as having four features. There is indeed a radical opportunity. The near future can be much better than the present situation, much better than anything we've experienced in history. The human condition can be radically improved, as I have shown, compared to what we've inherited from history and evolution, resulting in that 5S civilization. But equally, or almost equally, in terms of probability, there is an existential danger in which the near future could be much worse than the present situation. Humanity minus, with catastrophic consequences from the misuse of powerful technology, a new dark age or worse. When I'm feeling optimistic, I think there's about a 55% chance we'll reach that humanity plus future within a few decades. But equally within a few decades, there's a 35% chance, roughly, we will be in a much worse situation, and only a small probability that we'll still be muddling along through with something similar to today's quality of life and quality of society. What makes the difference between these two outcomes is us, humans, our agency. Whether we are wise enough in our thinking and strong enough in our concerted action to propel history in that positive direction. But the fourth point I want to make here is that there are no easy options. And if we don't give enough attention, if we are distracted, if we are confused, if we are fearful, there's a high likelihood of this radically bad outcome. So that's the start of the assessment I, as an active transhumanist, offers. And with that context, I will now move on to filling out the rest of this picture, discussing the ultimate why. What are the core values that I think the world needs? What are the methods, the how, the means that we should prioritize? And even bigger picture, the generalizations and extensions that are of critical importance too. So to move to the core transhumanist value, some of our critics unfairly suggest that what motivates us is technology for technology's sake, longevity for longevity's sake, intelligence for the sake of intelligence, efficiency for the sake of efficiency, or happiness for the sake of happiness. I say all of that is shallow. What transhumanists are really about is well-being, broadly understood. Sometimes we have the phrase, being better than well. And if you ask transhumanists what do we mean by that, we will point to lots of attributes. Things like vitality, liberty, creativity, health, intelligence, awareness, happiness, yes, collaboration, and even bliss. But we most of all want to highlight the importance of keeping an open mind, that our understanding of human well-being will likely evolve as we understand more from the inputs of science and experience. But I don't want to be too open here. There are two aspects of human well-being that need to be called out in their own right. I list them on this picture as core values 6 and 7. 6 is the paramount importance of individual well-being. I reject the claims that individuals should be prepared to sacrifice their own well-being for the service of their class or the service of their king or country, the service of their ideology or the service of their religion. Individual well-being can be supported for everybody with the abundance that lies within our grasp. But equally, we will get there not as individuals, but by recognizing the strong social nature of our existence and taking responsibility not just for ourselves, but for each other. How are we going to get there? Of course, having that vision in mind helps, but we're going to need to set aside some tempting possibilities and instead focus on the best methods of science, collecting data and studying it objectively, and applying the principles of rationality, keeping an open mind, but also being alert through this principle of proactive vigilance for things that could unexpectedly arise. So we need to be ready to adapt and change in an agile manner. And the bigger picture, which I really don't have time to do justice to, extends these principles so there is not just well-being today, it's well-being sustainably without damaging our future possibilities. It's well-being not just for humanity, it's well-being for all creatures that are conscious, whether they are biologically conscious or in the future synthetically conscious. And this doesn't prescribe everything precisely. There's a lot of possibilities, a lot of diversity possible within these existing 12 goals. Hence the 13th, final but by no means the least, to celebrate and support a diversity. So these are, I think, the values that humanity as a whole needs. I list them here. But alas, sometimes when people think about transhumanism, they don't see always these values. They sometimes see the opposites or the neglect. And that forms the transhumanist shadow, of which I am a critic. So when people don't pay sufficient attention to point two there is the shadow aspect of being complacent about risks. A very dangerous tendency, in my view, something that we see echoed in the modern philosophical movement of accelerationism. I'm all for harnessing acceleration, but it has to be done with a full awareness of the very dangerous risks ahead. If we neglect item 3 there, we end up with determinism, something akin perhaps to a Marxist determination of the victory of the working class being inevitable, or some religious determinism which says that everything's preordained and we will be one of the elect. I reject all these determinisms. Human agency is paramount. A technological determinism might be psychologically appealing, but it leaves us enfeebled. If we have an inadequate view of human well-being, we might end up loathing our biology and rushing too quickly to a possible future in which just we exist as uploaded minds. If we pay insufficient attention to the goal of mutual responsibility, we will end up, as in some parts of the transhumanist community, with egocentric transhumanism. If we pay insufficient attention to the true principles of science, we end up too quick to hype some solutions, too quick to be dogmatic about our best ways forwards. And one aspect of dogmatism is when number 10 there is ignored and some people are too dogmatic that we don't need regulations, which is a very dangerous course to follow, in my view. We need wise, smart, agile regulations. And if we don't have it, we're likely to end up in that bad future. Just to round off this discussion, if we are insufficiently respectful of diversity, we'll end up not with egocentric transhumanism, with monoculture transhumanism, which, as with most monocultures, is much weaker than it could be. What about the first item on here? No transhumanist will put insufficient attention on radical opportunity, but the rest of the world might. And if we don't have that credible, tangible, vision of a much better future, we are likely to end up with the narrow-minded approach that is characterizing much of the world today, a world which fails to see great possibilities ahead, a world that ends up in a state of depression and alienation. So I'll end my own remarks by highlighting once again what can be done if we do harness the possibilities nanotech, biotech, infotech, and cognitech and build this transhumanist possibilities of a sustainable superabundance for all, accelerating next generation green technology to create an abundance of clean energy, accelerating breakthroughs in synthetic biology so we have an abundance of healthy, nutritious food at low cost. We should accelerate nanotech so we can more quickly have an abundance of high quality material goods and shelter, an abundance of affordable health enabled by acceleration of rejuvenation biotechnology, an acceleration of all-round intelligence, not just rational intelligence, via improvements to cognitech, an abundance of time for creativity by adopting automation technology wisely, an abundance of time to explore the wonders of external and internal space via progress with space technology and virtual reality tech. And last but very important, perhaps most important on this list, by the right kinds of social technology, we can enable an abundance of collaboration and democracy. All of this is possible, in my view, well within a few decades, possibly by 2040. And the reason it can be accelerated is by taking wise advantage, careful advantage, profound advantage of the possibilities of artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.